And it's going to start across our campuses. And as we do that, let me just ask you, if you were asked to pick a single word to describe your season in life right now, or just a word that would, describe the state of the world that we live in, what word would you choose? Try to keep it church appropriate word to describe. I think if I chose a word for us, I think I would get a lot of amens with this word, complex. Complex. It's a word that seems kind of odd when you think about the fact that every infomercial, every pop-up ad promises to make our lives more simple. And yet we live complicated lives. And that complexity doesn't just come from the difficulty of maintaining a work-life balance and trying to get 3 kids to soccer, wrestling, and chess, like all in the same afternoon. The complexity comes from limited, and permission for amens here, limited time in the day to do more than a day's work. Amen. It's complex, right? Limited ability and energy to do all things well. Limited wisdom to know the difference between what's silly and what's important and what's urgent. Complexity comes from the frustration of best laid plans that seem to just go asunder at any given moment. Complexity comes from how the broken people in our lives and our past wounds can amplify the intensity of just about anything. And that's just all in a day's work, right? Over the next couple weeks, we're going to talk about a proven strategy to organize our lives around so that we can experience some contentment and some peace in our world. And so this series has been entitled Real Simple, because it shouldn't take a 90-page manual to describe what is most important in our lives. And when we skip that, it's the fastest path that leads to regret. Now, we've got a group that's going to file in and sit behind me. You guys can come up right now. I want to take you back to a moment in time where I don't remember the issue. I can't remember if it was a family issue, if it was a church issue, if it was external, if it was internal. But I remember having this thought, and this thought has stayed with me, is that the more complex an issue builds itself up in your mind to be, the more simply you need to deal with it. Does that make sense? The more complex it seems, the more simple we need to, more simply we need to address it. And in the very complicated lives that we lead, we can actually aim for a simple approach as a way of protecting what's most important in our lives. The Real Simple approach and the Real Simple series, it starts on a day when we're really celebrating the large overlap between homemakers and women in this room. And we're going to talk through a strategy that does that. You're going to hear from several voices today. I'm very excited about it. Next week, I get to be more in pulpit form, but today we get to hear a group of people who are living this out. And the strategy is simply this: GFO. God, family, others. If we can reduce the complexity of life down to the simplicity of God, family, others, what we will have done is we will have ended up protecting what is most important in our lives. We will have ended up devoting our best energy and attention to what we already know is going to matter most in the end. Jesus helped us think this way with a simple line in a long passage in Matthew chapter 6. It's a very relatable passage. It's all about the anxiety that we live with every day, the many understandable worries of life, day-to-day pressures that we experience. And Jesus narrows that focus down to a single directive. You may have heard it before. He says this: if you seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, all the other things that we worry about, all the other things we hope that will fall in line, will be given to you as well. See that? From complex to simple. It's a very freeing thing. And this is why GFO, God, family, others, is so helpful. Because when we tune out the noise and look at our lives the way God does, when we look at where we truly want to end up and just work backwards from that, That's when we realize that God, family, others is a strong yet simple strategy. So the special thing we wanted to do today is to give you a chance to hear from a few women in our church who are seeking to live this out in very practical ways. They are willing to share their stories on how they've gotten it right in some ways and how they've gotten it wrong or still developing in other ways, but they are trying to organize their life around what matters most. And so I want to ask you, Kelsey and Courtney are going to be leading this panel of ladies, and so I want to ask you to welcome them as they facilitate a great discussion of our moms today. Can you do that? Thank you, ladies.
Yes, so I'm Kelsey.
I'm Courtney.
And we really do have the privilege of facilitating this. You know, we help to choose these women on stage, and if you've been around Heritage for any amount of time, you know that these are some great, valuable women to have up here, and they're going to have some amazing wisdom for us this morning. So the first thing that we want to ask you ladies is to tell your name, how many kids you have, and then something that maybe is specific to your type of motherhood.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Evelyn, and I have a 2.5-year-old Kaleo and a 6-month-old Amaya. Something that is very unique about my mothering is that when I picture motherhood, I always thought that I was gonna have that home and work balance. It wasn't until I was pregnant with Amaya that I really felt God calling me to be with them. And a phrase that continually repeated in my head, and I knew it was coming from God, it was that he kept telling me that I was made for this, right? I always wanted to be a mom, and just really encouraged me to embrace that. And I guess another piece too is that in our household we really value culture. So raising 2 babies that are bicultural and bilingual is something that, you know, God is guiding me through every day too.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dana. And I have a total of 5 kids and 9 grandchildren. And what's unique with my motherhood is that we do have a blended family, and that's unique. And also just, allowing God, this is what God gave me. And, family it's just a blessing. Family that he's given me. I've always wanted a big one, and this is what I have. So, and if you guys know me, you know it's a big one.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I have 2 girls. Avery is 7 and Brinley is 6. And something that's unique about myself is that I'm a single mom for about the past 4 years. Obviously, that was never the plan. And it's been a journey, and I'm really excited to tell you a little bit more about how God has been with me on that.
And I'm Sherry, and I have 7 children, and if Dana has a blended family, we have a Vitamix blended family. My husband got the MOGO, the married one, get one free, when he married me. And we have 3 homegrown children and 3 transplants. And our transplants are adopted kids through the different foster care system. I'm a grandmother of 10, 9 living grandchildren and 1 in heaven. And we were a military family. So I often tell moms groups, I should have probably started a spoon collection, but instead I started a kid collection, and they're a little harder to move, but a great joy.
And a little more expensive, right?
A little more expensive, yeah. Right.
Oh, thanks, ladies. Before we jump into the deep end of some of our questions, we wanted to start off a little bit lighter. And so the first question is, obviously we know motherhood is not about perfection. There's no perfect mom. We all have our good days and our bad days, and so we're curious if you guys have any mom fail stories that you'd be willing to share with us.
Okay, so I had to think about this because there's probably more than one that you can come up with. Quentin was about 7 years old, and we were celebrating his birthday, and we were going to skate on Grand, which is in Fox Lake. So I went to the Walmart, and first of all, I have to say, Quentin's birthday is in January. So we had got some snow that morning, parking lot was a little slushy. Went to the Walmart to pick up the cupcakes that you ordered 24 hours before. And I got to the car, and as I was trying to put the cupcakes in the car, they all fell face down on the ground. And of course, I'm just kind of looking, and I'm like in tears, and I pick them up, and I go back home, and I'm crying to my husband like, okay, this happened. And he was like, well, did you go back in and order some more? And I'm like, no. So he took care of it, of course, but that was, and my family does not allow me to pick up or carry the cakes or cupcakes anymore.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely more than one, but this one's pretty funny. So, mornings are busy, they're hectic. I'm sure everybody can relate to that. And I've always kind of been the kind of person who is late to everything. So this particular morning, we had the chance to be on time, and I had to drop the girls off at daycare and then get to work. And we were cutting it really, really close, but I was excited because we were gonna make it. And the girls were kind of by the front door, and I was in the kitchen, and I just kind of shouted, okay, you guys, hurry up, get in the car, get buckled. If we leave right now, we're gonna be on time, And I always tell them like, quick as bunnies. And so they get in the car, I gather whatever I was supposed to get, and I get in the car, and I look back, they're buckled, we're good to go, get to daycare, and I get out of the car and open the back door, and I don't remember which one of them it was. I think it was my older daughter, Avery, had no shoes on. And I said, where are your shoes? And she said, well, you just said to get in the car. You didn't say to put my shoes on. So needless to say, I was not on time to work that day.
Sure. I laugh because your story reminds me of my son when he turned 2, that I was very particular. I'm like, I gotta find the perfect 2 balloon. So I went to get it inflated, and I walk out of the party city and poof, just pops, right? So that reminded me. But I'll quickly share, my biggest mom fail has been, I love crafts. So I have like a board of all these crafts I'm gonna do with my kids. So I remember having like the sensory bag for Kaleo that I built, and he just like saw it and didn't care for it. Just like, no thank you, Mom. And then I'm like, okay, well, let's try a sensory bin. So I was like, got all the stuff together, put rice. And then, of course, I was smart enough to put it like in the carpet. And then just like, well, we all know that's a fail. And until this day, when I vacuum, I still find like little grains of rice. So I didn't learn from the first time, I guess.
Yeah, I love those, and I think some that probably we didn't share is just our emotional meltdowns that we might have on a daily, weekly basis, right? Those are mom fails, but they all just kind of remind us how much we do need God in our momming. Like Justin mentioned, we're going to touch on questions, God, others, family. So our first question for these wise ladies is, was there a season, this is for Dana and Sarah, I believe, yes. Dana and Sarah for this one. Was there a season in your life specifically where your relationship with Jesus grew for one reason or another, and how did that relationship grow?
Okay, yes, many seasons, but one that just kind of stood out to me to share with you all is, it's probably happened a couple of years ago. Anyway, so, being a single mom means that I have my kids only half the time. Half the time they're with somebody else. And as moms, we just really want to protect our kids. We want to know everything that's happening in their lives. What are they exposed to? What are they hearing? Who are they around? What's happening? What is their environment like? And so that was a big struggle for me to kind of, I was very worried every time they were gone. And there was one situation in particular where I felt like it should have been kind of a family decision before the action was taken or a decision was made, and I didn't get to be part of the decision-making process, and I didn't agree with the decision, and I was really upset about it. And I was so stressed, and I went on a run, and I'll never forget this moment. I was like, I'd been, worried and just carrying this kind of turmoil in me for, however long it had been, probably a couple years by this point. And went on a run, and like, all of a sudden, God just said, don't you remember who I am? And don't you remember that I'm in control? Like, give me that. And I stopped, like, dead in my tracks on the trail. And I just looked up and I was like, you're right. You know, I'm sorry, you know, and kind of just, I mean, immediately that weight was just kind of lifted. And I felt like, oh my gosh, like, I've been so worried about this, thinking about it, like, constantly, every time I'm not with my kids. And it's so simple. I mean, the God of the universe is in control. And yes, things are going to happen that I'm not going to like. But ultimately, like, he is the author of their lives, you know, the same as he's the author of any of ours. And I trust him with my own, so I can trust him with my kids too.
My story, I mean, you know, as your kids grow up and get older, there's so many different situations that you'll come across. But ultimately, when I thought back about this over the week, you know, it comes down to trust. It really does. You really have to develop your trust in God. I would probably say 8 years ago, you know, my son and his now wife, you know, had came to us, even the in-laws, and was, you know, like, we're having a baby. And that was really hard as a mom to take in, especially when neither one of them were done with school. There was a lot of disagreements, a lot of, even with me and my husband, there were just, you know, we just weren't on the same page with our kids and what we thought was best for them at that time. But I do remember at a time I felt alone. I felt that nobody was hearing what I was saying. But then God spoke to me and he's like, trust me, I will work this out. My verse has always been Proverbs 3:5, and there's so many different versions, you know, nowadays. There's an LT, NIV, the Message, whatever. But you guys all know that. Trust in the Lord. Don't lean on your own understanding, you know, in all things look to him and he will, you know, guide your way. And I have lived by that throughout this whole 8 years. I mean, there's been plenty of more babies, but the blessing is there. God has provided a blessing in that relationship, and not only that, our families are very close, and you can just see the blessings that have, you know, bled out into the other families, the coming to church, coming to God. So it, you know, may not have felt like that at the time. You just kind of go through this despair, but God has a plan, and we just have to trust in him.
So good. I love the vulnerability in your guys' answers too, so thank you for sharing that. Our next question is about connection. And if you're a mom, you know, and a dad as well, you know that raising kids can be chaotic, it can feel crazy, and sometimes connection and relationship can get kind of lost in the midst of that. And so for Evelyn and Sherry, we would love to know, what do you guys do, or what have you done to kind of maintain and foster connection and relationship with your families?
Well, for us, because we were a military family, 6 of the 7 kids were just 8 years apart. So it was this friendship, this kind of tight reality that we had. Our first thing that we kind of really, our mantra was sort of to love your neighbor as yourself. And that means you were loving your roommate, your bedmate, or your playmate, whatever. And sometimes that meant you had 4 brothers in a room and 2 sisters in a room. So we really harped on loving your neighbor as ourself. The other thing we did was, it was sort of between a Christian camp and some sort of wacky, Brady Bunch type thing. There were so many of us. And so we just encouraged teamwork. And our kids were each required to not think of themselves as much as the team, and to participate and be a part of the team. And I still see it today in our adult children. If one falls, the other one's helping them. And if they're not helping them, they're praying behind the scenes for them. I mean, it's really a deep love and a deep connection. The other thing we did was we played hard. I mean, we played hard. We cheered for each other. We skied the Alps and the Alaska, and we really played hard. And I think playing together was really an important attribute for our family, and I see it today. We still love to join together, and it's now we have all the grandkids in the mix, and it's just beautiful chaos is what it is.
I love this question just because how I see connection is on different dimensions, right? If you think about us carrying our babies, like there's literally that umbilical cord that connects us, right? So there's that physical connection, and the way how, I mean, right now with how I love being connected with my babies is that with Amaya, I absolutely love to nurse her. And with Kaleo, I think bedtime is like one of my favorite things to do, right? I'm reading a story and praying together, and his favorite thing is like he chooses like a song every night. So just singing to him, so that individual connection I have with them, right? But also like as a family, because sometimes like if dad is working, then it's like he doesn't get to be part of all those moments. So for me as a mom, it's always been important to have like a meal that we share together. So like dinners are super important for me, and and another thing too is like being intentional. Since Kaleo was born, we were thinking of ways that he could be part of the family. I never liked the idea of high chairs. I always felt like high chairs were so like far behind, and the level was so off too. So we actually love having like a booster seat where we're all at the table. Like I can see everybody at the same level. So sharing that meal, I mean, we love to eat. And something that I wanted to also talk about is how through those meals we develop what are like just like things that become part of our routine. Something that we started doing last summer, like once or twice a week when it's beautiful outside, we just throw stuff in the Instant Pot, go to the park, and just like play, and then come back for the dinner. And something about connection too is that I think connection comes in order. So I realized that the times that I don't feel connected with my kids, with my husband, like I just feel so off, it's probably because I haven't been connecting with God, right? So knowing that God is like the source of my connection, and if I'm not connected with him, then it's really hard to connect with others.
Yeah, those are some great ideas. I love, Sherry, the concept of teamwork. Like, we say team grop in our home sometimes, but I think I need to teach that to our kids more. And Evelyn, I love some of your ideas too. Maybe we can take some and start using them, right? I will say, Evelyn, I love that you love bedtime, because usually I'm just like, I'm done with the day. Let's just rush through this. So you must be yeah, that's right. Bedtime's like, check that off the list. Let's move on. Okay, so we also, as you've already been hearing through our time together this morning, I hope you're sensing that we know that some of you may not have biological children, may not even have adopted children. So we wanted to talk about the concept of spiritual moms. We know that to all of these women represented up here and to a lot of you out here, there's been someone, an other in your life who has really inspired you, helped you to grow, taught you. And so a couple of these women are going to share who are spiritual moms who have helped them to develop as moms and as women.
Okay, my friend Gail is 8 years older than me, and she kind of took me under her wing when we lived in Geilenkirchen, Germany. We were at a NATO base. I didn't know how to grocery shop on the economy. I ordered what I thought was a pound of salami, and it was a kilo of salami. I don't know if any of you know the difference, but there's about a pound and a half difference. So anyway, she took me under her wing and helped me, but she is a prayer warrior, she is content, and she has the gift of mercy. So she always helps me think the best of whatever situation or person or struggle that I'm having.
Okay.
So the person that I would like to talk about is an aunt of mine. Her name is Dawn, and she has just been a constant, like, spiritual reinforcer in my life. Like, every time that I interact with her, she points me to Jesus, and I know that she's somebody that I can go to for solid advice and wisdom because I know where she gets it. And she's a beautiful example as a mother as well. I'm just going to give you a little bit about her. She's had a pretty rough life, but a great life. She and my uncle were missionaries to Hong Kong and Taiwan. He has cystic fibrosis, and so they were unable to have children of their own. They adopted 2, my cousins, and that brought a lot of challenges. And I think she went through probably some of the toughest things that a mom can go through with children. And then when my cousin had a baby of her own at a very young age and was unable to take care of her, my aunt and uncle adopted her and are now raising her. And she's about 16 years old. And it's so, there's been a lot of valleys, but she has, her faith has never wavered. She has just, every single card she gives me, every single time I see her, she's just quoting scripture and being encouraging and uplifting. And even though there's so much chaos that has gone on, she is a constant source of peace in my life. And I really appreciate her for that and just the guidance that she has given me for Jesus, or to Jesus, over and over and over again, all of my life. And just for the example of a mother that she is.
So I would say for me is my mother-in-law. We actually don't see each other that often, which I wish we did, because every time that I'm with her, she teaches me so much about selfless love, right? I think a lot of parts of motherhood is like not really paying attention to yourself. Yes, taking care of yourself is important, but it's very sacrificial, and she does it in such a loving way. And how I see her in her motherhood is like running a marathon, right? And she's very steady in her mothering, and also it doesn't matter if it rains, if it hails, like life can throw anything at her, and her vision just remains in God. And she's just such a loving and servantful woman that I really look up to.
That's great. Thank you, guys. So as we wrap up, unfortunately, I wish we could do this all day. It'd be a lot of fun. But as we wrap up, we would love to, each of you guys, if you had just one piece of advice that you could give to a new mom, an experienced mom, or just women in general, what would that advice be?
I think I would just encourage each and every person to live in the present, to love Jesus with their whole heart, and to pour it out for him, because he's coming back soon, and I want him to find me completely pouring it out for him.
I concur. I will just say grace. Have grace for your kids. Have grace for yourself. There's going to be a lot of times where you'll have up and downs, and just be kind to yourself, and of course, always look to God for guidance, but just grace.
So what I'm going to say kind of echoes what we've been saying, but just to continually remind yourself of who God is in every area of your life. I feel like for me, there's just no greater comfort or peace than the knowledge that everything is in his hands. And, we're going to face trials, we're going to face hardships, there's going to be crazy things that happen. And a lot of times we're going to feel out of control, but we can just focus on remembering who is in control, and his power and his love and his, strength and wisdom. That just brings me so much peace.
And I think it's not really advice, but as we're up here sharing our stories and knowing that all moms come from different backgrounds, I think that what God told me when I was pregnant with Amaya, right, that he just kept repeating that phrase, that you were made for this. I think that I just want to say that to all the moms here, right? Like, you were made for motherhood. And I know it can be difficult sometimes. And the way how God was telling me, it wasn't so much like, you are a mom, just do it, right? It's more like I'm here backing you up, and I'm gonna walk with you, even the difficult times. And you were created to be a mom and be a mom and be the incredible mom that you are already, and God is just there cheering for you. So those are just some words that I just feel in my heart that a lot of women need this morning too.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that idea of you were made for this. Whether, again, a biological mom or not, we are nurturers and caretakers in different ways. And so thanks for that word and for all those words, guys. We are so thankful for your time. I hope women in our church, I hope what this reminds you is that we have other women who can walk alongside of you in your momming and your life of being a woman. And you can grab them. They can give you advice. We can pray together. But we have some rich wisdom among us. So can we just give them a round of applause? Okay.